Shutter speed, along with aperture, are the two camera controls that give us the flexibility to use our creatively correct exposures based on our artistic intent, rather than just whatever the camera's auto exposure comes up with. The good news about shutter speed is the fact you can use fast or slow shutter speeds to create different outcomes. Pan with the action to get some really spectacular photos, or imply motion while your camera is stationary, usually on a tripod. These two photos by student Nicole Beal illustrate the difference between a fast shutter speed, in this case 1/1/500th of a second, and a slow shutter speed, which in this example was 1/30th of a second. Now notice that Nicole used a tripod and probably had her subject run back and forth many times until she got these photos just right. For her shutter speed assignment, Brittany put some household baking flour in her hair, placed her camera on a tripod, and used the self-timer to delay the shutter release until she could position herself in front of her camera. Then, with a quick flip of her head, the flour flew into the air, creating a galaxy-like effect. By experimenting and repeating the head flip, Brittany eventually found that a moderate shutter speed of 1/200th of a second worked best for her photo. By using her camera on a tripod and a shutter speed of 1/4th of a second, which is pretty slow, Sarah was able to keep the rocks and trees in sharp focus in this photo, but the moving water is blurred and looks more like cotton candy than water. Three factors affect shutter speeds that are necessary to freeze action, particularly fast-moving action. The first is the distance between the camera and the subject. Close action requires a faster shutter speed than distant action. Think about for a minute a jet plane that's in the distance. It seems to crawl. But when you think about a jet plane that's very close to you and really moving, it goes by very quickly, and as you can imagine, would require a faster shutter speed. Direction is another factor. Action that's moving towards you will seem to increase in speed as it approaches. Action that's moving away will seem to slow as it gets further away from you. But action that is perpendicular and close to you may move very fast. And finally, lens choice. Telephoto lenses just simply require faster shutter speeds to freeze action than wide-angle lenses, whereas a 1/125th of a second might work with a 20mm wide-angle lens. 1/500th of a second or faster might be necessary when you're using a 200mm zoom. Panning with action involves deliberately moving the camera parallel to and at the same speed as the subject, and using a slow shutter speed such as 1/60th or 1/30th or 1/15th of a second. If there isn't an appropriate background, though, no background blurring will occur. And when you're panning with action, a tripod isn't recommended because it's more likely to hang you up than to help you out. Shutter speeds are displayed in the LCD screen, the viewfinder on your camera, or if you have one, a shutter speed dial. Now, it's best to recall that speeds displayed as like 60 or 125 or 250 are actually fractions of a second. So, for example, 60 would be 1/60th of a second, 125 is 1/125th of a second, and so forth. Photographs can imply motion with slow shutter speeds when the camera is stationary and the subjects are in motion. A tripod was used for both these photos, along with a 1/30th of a second shutter speeds, and the subjects demonstrating motion. We can tell the motion blur is not a mistake because the backgrounds are in sharp focus. Because the backgrounds are stationary, the subjects clearly imply motion, and the motion blur in these photos is clearly our intent. So in summary, shutter speeds are displayed as numbers, such as 30, 60, 125, but they're actually fractions of a second. Freezing fast-moving action requires a fast shutter speed, and slow shutter speeds with a stationary camera can be used to imply motion. Panning with action requires movement at the speed of the action as well as an appropriate background. And the three factors that affect shutter speeds necessary to freeze action are distance, direction, and the lens choice. For your assignment for this module, you want to photograph the same fast-moving subject to demonstrate how a fast shutter speed freezes fast-moving action, and how a slow shutter speed with a stationary camera implies motion. So see Canvas for complete assignment details, and good luck with your assignment.